What are the health implications from eating salt? How much of an effort should we make to avoid it? It seems to be in everything.
Well, it isn't everything, because everything people are eating is highly processed foods that don't taste very good because they're highly processed. And the way they make up for it is adding chemicals back to the food in the form of salt, oil, and sugar. The food just becomes a carrier agent to drive sugar, oil, and fat to your palate. So I think that it's important to try to minimize all salt, oil, and sugar by getting back to whole natural foods. So what does that mean? It means we're getting people to eat things like oatmeal and fresh fruit in the morning. It means having salads, steamed vegetables, potatoes, rice, and beans, up to an ounce of nuts a day. We don't need to have all the heated, beated, processed foods once we get out of the pleasure trap. Once we free ourselves from the addiction of the artificial stimulation of these chemicals, then all of a sudden good food becomes more appealing. For people that are having trouble doing it on their own, we encourage them to come to the True North Health Center, undergo medically supervised fasting, reboot the palate, and then see what good food tastes like and see whether or not the results justify the extra effort that it takes.
Brian Clement from the Hippocrates Health Institute says that today's fruit is picked unripe and has been hybridized to be much sweeter than it was in nature many years ago. He says that fruit sugar is still sugar and that healthy people should limit fruit consumption to no more than 15% of their diet by weight, or around a piece a day. He says people fighting a health challenge should eliminate it completely until they're better. Do you agree with his recommendations?
Well, I agree and I disagree. I agree with some of his recommendations and his acknowledgement that fruits are hybridized products that are higher in sugar and lower in fiber than they might be, say, in a natural setting. If you go and eat some wild apples in Hawaii, you find they're very fibrous, lower sugar content foods. I disagree that fruits are not health-promoting foods for most people. What I do recommend, though, that when people eat fruit, that eat whole fruit, not all the juices and the processed stuff and the byproducts, and that when they eat fruit, it's good to include significant quantities of green vegetable material like lettuce and cucumbers and other high-fiber foods, because what we find is even patients that are a little bit sensitive to fruit, if they combine large amounts of salad-type material with their fruit, the fiber from the vegetable materials tends to slow the rate with which sugar is absorbed into the system, blunting the insulin effect. And for most people, this appears to be a perfectly acceptable source of health-promoting food. Now, there are patients that have debility. They have diabetes. They may be suffering with active cancer, et cetera, where even that smaller amount of sugar may be a compromising issue. And so for those people, we may limit or even eliminate the use of fruit from their diet for a period of time. So we see fruit as a health-promoting food when it's used appropriately. We don't want to make the basis of the diet around higher sugar foods. The base of the diet is around vegetable and vegetable starches. But we do see and do include fruit. You know, the most general description, we talk about one fruit meal a day and 2 vegetable-dominated meals a day. And even in that one fruit meal, we're often including plenty of greens and possibly grains. So, it would represent a relatively small percentage of the overall calories in the diet, but certainly can still be a significant source of both enjoyment as well as nutrition.
Can too many cooked beans and whole grains raise our blood sugar and make us pre-diabetic or diabetic?
Well, I don't think that you're going to find that the major contributing cause to diabetes is going to be so much tied to carbohydrates as much as it's going to be tied to fat intake. I think there's going to be a stronger correlation of fat intake than complex carbohydrates. Now, it is true, refined carbohydrates and fat both may have contributory roles, and we want to limit or eliminate certainly excess fats and all refined carbohydrates. As far as complex carbohydrates like beans, I don't think that, beans themselves have a relatively lower glycemic index than some other sources of carbohydrates. They're generally well tolerated by patients that are diabetics. I don't think that beans themselves are the contributing cause, but dietary excess is clearly a major issue. And you can get dietary excess from virtually any product, particularly if salt, oil, and sugar are used in their preparation or in their serving. So you can overeat on just about anything if you adulterate anything with things like salt, oil, and sugar.
Does fruit contribute to type 2 diabetes?
Well, to the extent that type 2 diabetics are having problems with insulin resistance, and fruits are a source of simple carbohydrate, fruits will increase blood sugar levels in those patients. The answer is fixing the underlying insulin resistance so that their ability to tolerate that exposure might be improved. In the meantime, you may need to limit or eliminate fruit exposure just because their capacity to deal with simple sugars is so limited. But even in type 2 diabetics, you can often include limited amounts of fruit so long as those fruits are taken with large amounts of vegetable cellulose. The real problem here is getting people to eat enough vegetables. So we want people eating large quantities, big salads. We know that the salad's big enough when everybody you know looks at you and goes, "Oh my gosh, you're not going to eat all that, are you?" It's shock and awe. If they don't react with shock and awe, you got the wrong size bowl. We go get a bucket, because we want people eating as much vegetable-based materials as they can shove in so there's not too much room left for anything else.
Does it make a difference for health if you eat beef from organic grass-fed cows versus factory farm cows?
Well, clearly, organic products are going to have some advantages over non-organic products, but something being less bad because it doesn't have certain chemicals doesn't make it a health-promoting food. It's still not a health-promoting food. The fact that it's less tough on the environment, that it's less morally indignant, that it's less spiritually corrupt, doesn't make it acceptable. So what we're about at True North Health is trying to tell people the truth. We're not telling them to go east or west. We're trying to tell them the truth as we see it. And what we're seeing is that the healthiest diet for the individual, for the planet, for your moral, spiritual, and ethical considerations is a whole plant food diet. And we try to limit salt, oil, and sugar as well from this whole plant food diet.
What do the major studies and health organizations around the world recommend regarding eating animal products? And do you agree with their statements?
Well, I think in general, there's a general consensus that less is better than more. Most of them are under tremendous pressure not to advocate a whole plant food diet. That would raise all kinds of difficulties politically, economically, and otherwise. But you'll notice, like, for example, recently in Canada, they've come out with a new profile that really looks a lot closer to the type of recommendations we've been making for 45 years, where the plate is largely filled with vegetable-based materials, and they're recognizing a much more limited role for some of these more highly processed or animal-based products. I think that when you're doing consensus development like that, there's always going to be some trouble telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But the fact that they're shifting in what we consider to be the right direction, I think, is encouraging.
What do you feel is the importance of the Real Truth About Health conference?
Well, I think that one of the things the Real Truth About Health conference has done is it's brought people in with alternative views that are not necessarily all in agreement. And so it's an opportunity for people to hear different sides of the story, not just different than conventional, but even within the context of the alternative health movement, there's quite a disparity in terms of opinions and ideas. And so I think it's good to bring all of those ideas out, give people an opportunity, unrestricted, to express their views, and let people decide for themselves what resonates the best for them. And they can differentiate, I think, much better than people often think is possible. So I like the idea of lots of different ideas coming out. The fact that I don't agree with everybody, I think that's great. And the fact that everybody can express their opinions in a respectful and in a manner as such, I think, is a really healthy way. And it's a way that we can all be exposed to different ideas and hopefully grow and learn as a consequence.